We know together, collectively, in a bipartisan fashion, that the United States, our nation, is a great nation. But our history is also stained by shameful and discriminatory acts based on race and religion. We have said never again. Never again will we judge a person by where they came from, the color of their skin, their gender, or what God they worship. But here we are. Our Declaration of Independence states all men are created equal. But as we all know, that only applied to white men. The First Amendment guarantees religious freedom. Yet Jews, Catholics, and many other faiths have been the targets of hateful prejudice. Today, it's Muslims. President Trump's sweeping executive order aimed at keeping Muslims out of the United States is not only an affront to our Constitution, it takes us back to a time of government-sanctioned discrimination that at the time was deemed to be okay, legally. And here we are again. In the 1840s and the 1850s, the Know Nothing Party rose to prominence on a platform that opposed immigrants and Catholics. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was the first significant law to restrict immigration into the United States. And by the way, the Chinese Exclusion Act originated right here under this dome before it became federal law in Washington, D.C. The Exclusion Act spurred later movements for immigration restriction against others considered, quote-unquote, undesirable, like Middle Easterners, Hindus, Sikhs, East Indians, and Japanese. We didn't allow Chinese residents to become U.S. citizens until 1943. After World War II broke out, our president, Franklin Roosevelt, interned more than 100,000 Americans of Japanese descent. As a nation, we have apologized for these atrocities and others. We have attempted to rectify our past with promises of never again. But here we go again. Last Friday, the president of the greatest nation on earth, Donald J. Trump, signed an executive order that desecrates our country's core values. It betrays the founding principle of our nation as a refuge for those escaping religious and political persecution. Even former Vice President Dick Cheney has commented that a Muslim ban, and I quote, goes against everything we stand for and believe in. That is a quote from the former Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney. The executive order places a temporary ban on individuals from 7 predominantly Muslim countries from entering the United States. Refugees from Syria are banned for an indefinite period of time. There has never been a terrorist attack on U.S. soil by immigrants from the 7 banned countries. The 4 countries where the 9/11 terrorists came from were not listed on the ban. Instead, the executive order bans victims of terrorism fleeing the savagery, death, and destruction of the Syrian civil war. The war has claimed more than 90,000 civilian lives, and last year alone, 3,923 children died in the war, nearly 11 children a day. The executive order combines inhumanity with incompetence. It was drafted without consulting the Secretaries of Defense and Homeland Security. It has resulted in chaos, confusion, deep anxiety, and hardship at airports across the nation. Americans from coast to coast, as we have witnessed this weekend, are protesting. Here in California, San Francisco International Airport, and Los Angeles International Airport. Now, this doesn't keep us safe. It exasperates America's anti-Muslim reputation and gives terrorist organizations another recruiting tool. The executive order resurrects discriminatory immigration policies based on national origin in direct violation of the long-standing Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. Now, the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 is very important to note in our history, because prior to 1965, it was de jure, it was the law in the Congress of the United States that any immigration coming to the United States would be only Scandinavian extraction or Germanic or Western European. 1965 changed the complexity of the United States of America as we know it today, when the first time they allowed lawfully those individuals from African countries, from the Caribbean, from the Western Hemisphere, and other Asian nations. Prior to 1965, lawful legal residency to the United States was exclusive to only those Western European nations. 1965 changed the face of who we are today and has contributed greatly to the amazing diversity. Federal judges, as we all know, have stepped in and issued emergency stays to block the deportation of those impacted by the executive order. Colleagues, here we go again, but we cannot remain silent. Senate Resolution number 16 condemns this executive order as a discriminatory overreach that illegally targets immigrants based on their national origin and urges the president to immediately rescind the executive order. It also urges the Department of Homeland Security to comply with federal court orders and allow detained individuals timely access to legal counsel. For those reasons and more, in a bipartisan fashion, I respectfully ask for an aye vote.